Wrokdown.
Hi, welcome to Wrokdown. I'm Wendy Stapleton. When the corporate world took over radio, that was it. According to some, it was all over. Words of wisdom from one of Australia's foremost DJs of the 60s, 70s and 80s. Radio was like a family. You knew all the shareholders. As a matter of fact, they'd come into the station every Friday night and have a drink with the boys. Well, here today to tell us all about the good old days and the new way radio's gone, a legend on the Australian radio scene, Mr. Karl van Est, or better known to some as Captain Karl.
Oh no, I'll never live it down.
Captain.
I'll never live it down. Hi, Wendy.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
You are quite famous, or I should say infamous,
Infamous, yes.
on the radio scene.
As you can tell, I've got a good head for radio. Doesn't look good on TV.
How do you know?
I just never, tell you, TV never worked for me.
Did you try?
I did, but Gavin Wood pushed me out of the way.
What about his head? We can say that.
Ernie Sigley proves that you can actually be on television.
Well, we're going to talk about you today and really the interesting way that radio has gone over the last, say, 30 years.
Yeah.
Let's start at the beginning. You were born in Holland?
Yes, I was born in a place called Den Haag. I came out to Australia in 1953. Obviously, I was only a kid. And ended up in a place called Geraldton in Western Australia, which is about 300 miles north of Perth. And on a farm, with my sister married, and so I got on the farm. I used to listen to the radio at 7:30 in the evening, or close enough to that, and I was just riveted, amazed with all the serials that were on, and the comedy hours too. They were fantastic.
Were you quite isolated?
Absolutely. There was nearest neighbour was 5 miles away.
Oh, okay.
On Sunday mornings, I'd listen to a radio station called 6GE, which emanates from Geraldton, and I used to listen to a thing called the BP Top 10 at 11 o'clock in the morning. They used to stretch it out right through till midday. Well, later on in life, my first job in radio was at 6GE.
And you were running were you running the Top 10?
And doing the same show that I listened to when I was a kid.
Okay, so when did you leave the farm? As soon as you could?
Yeah, well, I got involved in shearing sheep. That's where I got my bad back from too, by the way, which I'll tell you about later.
It's got a bad back.
Anyway, shearing sheep, and I had a run with a professional shearer, and he just said, look, there's got to be an easier way for you to make a living, because I was, it was pretty tough on the old back. I wasn't the biggest boy in town, so I went back to school, and the rest is history after that. I did a course, Technology 2, which I passed. Then got a radio operator's license, which meant I could go on board ship or on an oil rig. And I ended up going with an American oil company and then an American mineral company, just roaming around the desert with geologists, being the radio operator, just reporting back there what they'd done that day. And eventually, when I went on leave, I was back in Perth, and I'd met a girl and decided that I didn't want to do that anymore, go out in the bush anymore, so I decided to get a job in Perth. And lo and behold, there was an advertisement for a radio control operator. So I applied, and I got it. So then I was behind the scenes in radio as a kid. And from there, I met a few people and discovered the great life that you could have as a jock, as a DJ. They used to get 4 weeks holiday a year. They could wear whatever clothes they liked. You didn't have to wear a tie. And you could basically come and go as you pleased. And you got good money for it. So I thought, this has got to be me. This is me.
And you loved music.
Absolutely. So I got into that. And the station manager heard a tape that I'd done, a demo tape. I'd went to a radio school, which I didn't even finish it because I'd got a job before I'd finished. And I was very chuffed about that too, by the way, because the other 19 people who were in the course still didn't have any work. And I was, but there you go, it's just one of those things. And I was not the best, the sharpest tool in the shed. I was not the brightest of students as such. But one of the things that I could do was, if I made a mistake reading a commercial, I could ad-lib my way out of it like you wouldn't believe.
And you've never stopped.
And hence I got a job very quickly. So that was cool. And they sent me to 6G in Geraldton, which is where I started.
Obviously, radio stations know that they can send certain people out to gigs or venues, and that you will be able to get on with the musos, but not only be able to get on with them, but in some way make them feel comfortable enough around you to actually let you in.
Well,
Because you seem to always be able to fit right in with all of that.
I know what you're talking about, and I've got my finger on that pulse. After moving around in a lot of radio stations, 1975, I joined a brand new station called 2CC in Canberra. Now, I worked for them for 2 years, and in that 2 years, I got to interview all the artists that moved from Sydney to Melbourne. They came via Canberra to do a show. As you know, there's a circuit. So the Angels, for instance, were playing in town on a Thursday night. Marsha Hines was Queen of Pop at the time. Max Merritt came through. Bon Scott came through. Now, a guy called Dean Banks, who used to work at 3AW doing breakfast, I believe, Dean used to do 9 to 12 in the morning at 2CC, and he was given the job to interview Bon Scott. Well, Dean Banks has never been a music man at all, ever. Music's the last thing that he's ever thought of, as far as I'm concerned anyway. He was more into current affairs and stuff like that. So that's fine. Anyway, I had to listen to the interview while it was being done, and unfortunately Bon used to swear just a little. And
really?
I remember Dean Banks throwing the tape away basically like this, saying, "No one will ever hear that." And I was so upset about it.
Because of that episode with Dean, did the station managers realise that he probably wasn't the best person to do the interviews and realise that you were?
Oh, yes, definitely.
So you had the gig?
Well, I could handle Bon, whereupon Dean just let it happen, you know. And, you know, you can always cut out swear words.
Yes.
You know, but he was just a little bit too, it was a little bit beneath him. It was beneath him. Now, well, it was certainly not beneath me, because the station was still half built. We were operating out of it. And people like Marsha Hines used to sit on a rock out the front, waiting to be able to get in when the carpenters had finished doing something. And I used to have to sit out there with her and give her a cup of coffee and you know, try and make her feel comfortable while we were waiting to get into the building. And the same happened with Max Merritt, with Kevin Borich, and so forth. And I remember Glenn Wheatley. The first time I ever met Glenn was in Canberra at the station, and Glenn brought Glenn Shorrock in, the Little River Band. The Little River Band were just about to happen. First big push, right? And Glenn was such a lovely man. Shook my hand with glee, patted me on the back, and made me feel like I was a person, a real person. And I've been a fan of the band ever since. And
Yes.
I've been a fan of the man too. And
Absolutely.
And I, since Up the Track, worked for him. See, this is interesting, because when I left Canberra, I built up this whole repertoire of interviews with Australian acts and artists. So that when I decided to go overseas, I eventually ended up in London.
Well, hang on. Let's take a short break, because I want to hear about London, but I also would like to hear nothing bad, but your most interesting interviews.
They all come up.
They will come up.
I'll be telling you.
We'll take a short break and be back soon with Captain Karl.
Hey.
Yay.
Wrokdown.
Welcome back to Wrokdown. My special guest this evening is the infamous Captain Karl, Karl van Est.
Thank you, Wendy.
Okay, Karl, so when we were talking a minute ago, you met so many people coming through Canberra. As you said, all the acts that had to come down from Sydney to Melbourne came through Canberra. And I know from years and years of having spent many hours at a bar with you, that you have some wonderful stories. And I know one particular story involved the late, great Mr. Johnny O'Keefe.
Oh, Johnny O'Keefe. It's a good story, good story. Johnny O'Keefe, when you met Johnny O'Keefe, he just blew me away. He was a very short man, big on stature. His presence, as soon as he walked into the room.
Can I ask you what year this sort of was?
1973.
Okay, so it was the early 70s, yeah, good.
Yeah. Anyway, he had a song out at the time with a lady called Mockingbird. That's all I can remember about that part. But I do remember him coming to the radio station on a Friday, and all the DJs that were in the building at the time were asked to go to the boardroom. So we all went, and I was very young at the time, by the way. We're talking, I was 21 possibly or something. So I met Johnny O'Keefe, legend, amazing man. And he handed me an envelope, and he handed all the jocks envelopes. And he said, "This is the best that Maui has to offer." Well, I can't really sort of tell you what was happening. All I know is that Maui is an island off Hawaii, and he had been to Hawaii recently, and everyone in the station was very, very happy.
And he was
They were smiling a lot.
obviously very happy because you had backed up his...
We were playing his song.
He's playing his song.
But that was because the program manager who put it on, Peter Hardy, who also got an envelope. And that just blew me away. And that was my first
People don't
experience
do that
of graft.
People aren't...
That was my first experience of payola.
Now, okay, you brought it up.
Apart from a couple of free Kentucky Frieds, I had nothing to do with payola.
I wasn't going to bring it up, but you've brought it up. Was there a lot of payola? I don't mean in monetary terms, I mean in any way.
Indirectly. I mean, we were all friends, you know. I mean, I was in London for a long, long time, for 2 years.
But hang on, if you had no
You
control...
caught me out on this one.
Sorry. If you had no control
Right.
over the programming, right?
That doesn't mean you can't say things.
Ah, you can't play things, but you can say things.
That's the way I've always viewed it.
Good boy.
I got around that one.
Well, see, I was wondering.
Much to the program manager's
I was
dislike.
wondering. Okay, so then...
That's the way I looked at it. I thought, well, if I can't play this bloody thing, I'll certainly mention the acts in town anyway.
But that's wonderful, because that then, at least you are doing your bit and you're having your say, and if you believe and love your music as much as you do and did, good on you. Good on you. And I think probably a lot of other DJs did. It was just interesting, because you always wonder about things like that. Or, how things actually charted. How did that happen?
How did it happen?
Well, I mean, supposedly it's supposed to be on record sales.
Yes, supposedly. Now, when I was in London, I actually worked for a music magazine while I was there, before I became a licensed manager of a licensed restaurant, where I bumped into Kevin Borich and Max Merritt, and they all came to the restaurant. I used to give them all free food in London, and free lots of other things as well. And this all stood me in good stead, because when I got back to Melbourne, I had all these friends that I'd known in Canberra, and also
you had.
and also in London. So it was a big experience for me, a very, very big experience for me. But when I was in London working for the music mag, part of my job was to do a chart survey, and I used to ring up 25 stores. Physically do this and find out how many they'd sold of that, and that. Unfortunately, of course, they tended to load it up a bit on the other side. You have to read in between the lines a bit. They'd say that, oh, we've sold 10 copies of such and such, but in reality, they probably haven't sold any. So
how did you know? How did you know?
Well, because there were some acts that just weren't selling.
Well, see, that's what I was interested in, because I even find...
I mean, Dire Straits was huge over here in Australia. In England, you couldn't play them. No one really wanted to know about
what,
it.
like Money for Nothing?
No. Earlier Dire Straits.
Okay.
Like Lady Writer and all that early stuff. Well, that was huge over here, but not in London. In London,
so
they
are
didn't
you
like
saying
it
that then you would ring up to get the surveys, and they would say that they'd sold?
Yeah.
And you knew that they couldn't have, because no one had heard any of their...
None of them. No radio stations were playing them.
Say, for example, each radio station had its own chart. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then how would they create sort of like the national chart? Would it be a
well, it's a combination of but it's basically they ring around all the stores, but then they found that the stores were loading it up.
Yes, that's what I'm
so
saying.
therefore it was all null and void again. It's all out the roof.
So the charts were really a load of crap.
Absolutely. And here in
Nothing's
Australia,
changed.
here in Australia, they used to have another separate division like Hitbound,
Yes.
the songs that are going to be hits. Well, that was all a bit of a fist thing, because that was like the music director just having a bit of a punt.
I know. See, the thing is,
and so was the record company.
Much and all as it's sort of, we can have a laugh about it. It's heartbreaking, really.
When I got back to Melbourne, I came back to Australia because I knew that Glenn Wheatley and certain people were pitching for a license, an FM license.
Right.
And I'd had enough of AM radio by that stage anyway.
It was Ronnie Tudor, I think, as well. Was it Ronnie Tudor? Or?
Bill Armstrong.
Bill Armstrong.
Yeah, okay.
That's right. Okay, so.
But because I'd met all these people in London as well, as I said, when I got back to Melbourne at Eon, I was really well placed because I just knew these people. So when I originally started breakfast on Eon, and that didn't work out for me at all because I've never been an early morning person. I find early mornings very disturbing, and watching Ian Meldrum is even more disturbing too, because he never sleeps.
Oh, what was he doing in the morning?
He used to do breakfast at Eon FM.
Oh.
He comes straight from a club.
So you do it together?
No, Gavin Wood worked with him, but Gavin was the only straight man around. Because because Molly would leave the club, or whatever club he was at, with Andrew, his chauffeur, or Pierre, who was really Peter, and he'd turn up at the radio station and have a scotch and coke, I think he used to drink. And he's right out there. And Gavin had to control this guy. And it's very difficult for Lee Simon and everyone else at Eon to control this man. But he
Okay,
was fun.
so you moved from breakfast.
Yeah, to late nights.
Okay.
And I served my time out there because I felt more comfortable at night. And some things changed, some people left, and then I was given late nights, and luckily enough, that went number one in the survey.
I want to ask you, during our little break, you were saying that was one of the only places where you could really choose what you wanted to play.
Oh, yes.
And you had fabulous people working around you, people like Billy Pennell.
Billy used to do his own show, which was totally his own bag.
Yes, I remember that.
No one would interfere with Billy's the album show. I think
The album
it was called.
show, yeah.
And but in a way, as a jock, I found it to be more convenient to have the music actually picked for me by Billy. What I'm getting at is that after a while, we found that I'd be picking an album out, and the jock before me had already played it.
Right.
So there's a lot of repetition going on, and there's a lot of like, what did you play and what didn't you play in the last hour? So there was a lot of mix-ups going on.
Yeah.
So
Okay, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, can you tell me what, in your opinion, has been your best interview?
not too sure. I'll have some more of that Wrokdown coffee, and I'll tell you.
Okay.
Special
we'll be back
coffee.
soon with Karl van Est. Thank you.
Special.
Wrokdown.
Welcome back to Wrokdown. My special guest this evening is DJ extraordinaire Karl van Est. Welcome back, Karl. I saw you touching my Tim Tams.
I've been eyeing those Tim Tams off.
It's cruel, isn't it? Isn't it cruel? You look at it and you just think, what would it look like with all chocolate?
Oh, yeah, I understand.
I'm going to ask you to tell us about, I know there's probably thousands of great interviews, but do you have one particular interview that will always just stick in your
Yeah, I did one. I did an interview with Lou Reed, which I was so scared. You know, imagine having to interview Lou Reed, and this is in 1982.
Here in Melbourne?
Yeah, on FM, and I was so scared. You know, I mean, he's got, you know, he looks scary, you know. And I'm driving to work, and I'm at the lights, thinking to myself, "Oh no, you know, I don't know what to do. I'm so nervous."
You're sick.
And I got the then
Feel
I'm there with Billy in the record library, and Lou Reed, the man, walks in. Well, it was just on from there. He was so nice. He was just the best. And I was doing the interview in a studio with Hessian bags hanging off from the walls, because this place was still half up and half down. And the interview was just a breeze. And he was so gentle to me. It was absolutely gorgeous. And then again, on the other hand, that was one of the best interviews, because there's been a lot of them, but one of the worst was happening in the same studio around the same time. And that was with Chrissy Amphlett.
Oh, what happened?
From Divinals.
I know Chrissy. What happened?
Well, I'm not too sure, but I know Lee Simon got at me for it. Lee was the boss at the time.
Oh,
and
did you ruffle the feathers?
And Lee said, what have you done to upset Chrissy? You're bad at your job. He was inferring that it was my fault. But in fact, it wasn't. She just didn't like me, or like the cut of my jeans or something. She didn't like, that was it. And
it happens, doesn't it?
When it happens with a lady like that, it happens. and Mark, the guitarist, of course, he's in the same studio. And he's looking at me going, you know, he knows exactly what's going on.
So was it a short interview, or was it
Very
painfully
short.
long?
It was short, and it finished abruptly.
Karl, okay, radio.
Yes.
Why is it now that talkback radio seems to be sort of the top rating radio shows? What's happened to music on radio, and why are kids turning off in droves?
Well, it's a hard question, and it's only my opinion. I don't think that they're turning off in droves, by the way. I don't think that at all.
Okay, well, I'm wrong.
Now, answer your first question, talkback radio. It is my opinion that, for instance, in Melbourne, the top station is 3AW, which is a talk station. Now, they have more people over the age of 45 listening than anyone else.
So the baby boomers, that's us.
Everyone over 45 apparently listens to 3AW. According to the survey figures anyway, because they have so many people listening. And the next off the rank, of course, is Fox, which is a music station. And they have a certain blend of music, which is, they have a slight female slant. in their music. It's like softer than Triple M's music.
Okay.
Triple M tend to go the more harder, whereupon Fox goes to the softer. We call that a female skew or a male skew. It's a little bit like imagining your radio station as a person. How do people view you? 3AW, for instance, is number one because of talkback, and talkback's number one because there's just so much happening. The world apparently is supposedly, possibly falling apart out there. It's not certainly in Australia, but it certainly is elsewhere. And people want to know about it, and hence they tune in. And most old people want to know about it, and that's why they listen to it. But I'm a music jock, so obviously I'm still,
into your music.
and for instance, I'm a very, I listen to 3PBS a lot. I listen to Triple R. I listen to a whole selection. I do jump up and down the dial. I'm a jumper up and down. I admit it.
Karl, DJ Karl, to take us out tonight, I'm going to ask you to select one. I know you have got not a favourite, but
No,
just
too
choose
many.
one of your favourite songs from, say, 60s or 70s, please.
Well, 70s would have to be Daddy Cool. Definitely Daddy Cool.
Any particular song?
Oh, I love Baby Let Me Bang Your Box.
So
60 Minute Man wasn't too bad either. I liked Hannaford's deep voice on that one.
I'm going to thank Karl van Est, Captain Karl, for being our special guest on Wrokdown this evening.